Hey gang, welcome back to Joe Daddy's Garage. This week's video is part 8 in the 68 Camaro Rebuild, the car that is known as Basket Case. If you haven't seen the other videos, I suggest you go back and look at those so you have an idea what this is all about. But basically, I have this 68 Camaro that was either rolled or a tree fell on it. I don't know for sure, but I was told that it was rolled over. So I've already started working on the driver's side, and I'm replacing the whole side of that car. The passenger side is a different story. I'm working on replacing the quarter panel, the outer wheelhouse, and I'm going to be removing and replacing the rocker panel. Now this is a little bit different than what I did on the other side. And this side may be a little more complicated, honestly, because on the other side, even though I had to separate pieces and parts to make the whole side insert into the car, this involves removing the rocker panel, the outer rocker panel. And this is way more complicated than a Mustang. The way these pieces fit together, the A pillar, the B pillar, all that stuff interacts in a different way, and it's a lot more complicated. So let me show you what I'm working on. So in the other videos, I've worked on replacing this whole side of the car, the quarter panel, and there's extensive information on that process. And I'm not going to weld anything in yet until I have this other side in place. Now when I got this car, again like 8 years ago, the previous owner had cut off the quarter panel, he had cut the roof off, all this stuff was already done before I got it, along with the package tray and the deck filler panel. In this case, he has taken the outer wheelhouse and kind of cut it in different ways. Normally there is a seam weld, let's say right here, where the inner wheelhouse and the outer come together, and you can probably see all these little spot welds that involve these two pieces being welded together. What makes this complicated is this piece, the C-pillar structure, which creates the kind of inner part of the roof, and then the way these panels interact. So I've shown it before in my Mustang videos. I have done this same thing where I have cut out the part that I wanted to leave behind and put in the wheelhouse without disturbing all of this. The reason for that is if I want to break all this loose, I'm going to damage this part to make that happen. Same way with this piece. There's flanges exposed, but there's also flanges on the inside that you can't get to unless you get them from the underside. And then again, this piece continues on down with this overlap. So you end up really mangling stuff just to get this out of the way. When it comes down here, this piece also interacts with the rocker panel. So I'll go over more of that in just a second. What I was trying to express here is you can see this has already been cut, and this is the piece that came with the car. Now I understand the intent here, but the execution was poor. They removed enough material to where they could fit this piece in, but they ended up short. The way they cut this, it looks like they used, I don't know, tin snips or something, and this piece is just not usable in my purpose, or for my purposes. So I have this piece, which is a brand new outer wheelhouse that I had purchased with the whole side of the car when I ordered all this stuff. So I'm going to do a very similar task. I'm going to do a trim of this piece and this piece down here, and do the same on that wheelhouse. Now here's the thing, I don't have a reference point. Because he cut all of this off, I can't just say, well, I need to cut this much length off. And I get the idea that you've got a flange here that angles up. Well, I can't just push the wheelhouse up against it because of all this stuff in the way. So it's going to get a little bit complicated with this. I'm sure I'll figure it out, but just kind of showing you what's involved with this. Now, moving forward, I have a brand new rocker panel, and the reason I'm replacing this is this rocker panel is rusted out. This was no good, and it's also been hit. It's caved in on this side. So I'm going to have to separate that rocker panel. Now back here, I have to deal with all the sheet metal again, and we'll say the B pillar. So that attaches Pretty simple. It's got a little spot weld on that. This, I think they've already cut it loose here. If you looked at the other video, you know that there's an interaction between the inner and outer that gets a little complicated back here. You've got the corner and this inner piece, it stays. So I have to get this apart, and coming forward, of course, all the spot welds. And this is where probably the worst part of it. The A-pillar sits on top of the rocker panel. And if you look, you can see there's like a notch area right here, and then it comes forward, and you can see the corner out there. And there's that corner looking at it from the outside. Well, if you look at the new rocker panel, this is that same little corner that I showed on the inside, and coming forward, this is the corner on the outside. That means that this piece is all up inside of here. So I'm going to have to think about how I want to do this. I don't know that there's a benefit to removing all of this. My mind is kind of telling me I may want to cut this and notch this piece and leave it and re-weld this new piece on top or into it. So that's kind of where I'm at with this right now. But I'm going to focus on the outer wheelhouse for the moment and see if I can't come up with a solution. Before I start working on the wheelhouse, I needed to test fit the quarter panel. And I will say this actually looks pretty good. I have it clamped in a few places back here on the existing flange for this roof structure, and it lines up really close. Up here, this is much better than the driver's side, and I have not fit the rain gutter yet, but I'm just saying this is much better because I know this is pretty close to the edge here, as you've seen in the other video. The door gap, I mean, that's really decent at this point. You know, just setting it in place. I do have one screw holding it right here, sheet metal screw, and even down here where it meets the existing rocker panel, it looks like the line is really, really good. So I'm happy with that. And I was looking at some ideas for the wheelhouse, and I went to the other side. I didn't really think about it till afterwards, and I measured the drop from the inner wheelhouse to what is just held in place now, but the outer wheelhouse, and to the flange. Basically, if I came straight off the inner right here and I measured out to the inner flange of the wheelhouse, it's 11.5 inches. I think that's what I came up with. I'll verify that, but that gives me at least some idea of the drop and how close I need to be. The other thing with this quarter right now, it is basically just clearing this little shelf piece, and I think that's all good. So really I could probably measure that quarter and give me another idea as to what the drop is, but I'm pretty sure it's 11.5. But yeah, I'm happy with how that quarter fits right now. I don't know how well that's showing up, but pretty sure I think it's around 11.5. Here's the passenger side, and it's a little bit short of that. And I expect that because the quarter doesn't have anything pushing it out. So when the wheelhouse is in place, it's going to push the quarter out just a little bit, and I think it's good. So as you saw in the time lapse, what I did was I took some 3/4 inch tape and I laid the edge of the tape to where the radius kind of turns on the original piece here. I used this edge as a line, so that gives me a 3/4 inch space. This is where they had already cut it off, so I just left that, and then I did the same thing here. Now this is just a guesstimate. This is only to give me a reference line, because what I can do at this point is I can take the tape, or take another piece of tape and put it on that piece and then cut outside the line, and that'll leave me a longer little lip there. The idea being that once I get it trimmed down, I can put it up on top, and if I decide to, I can double cut this so that both pieces overlap and have the same seam. Or I can just draw a line on the inside and cut off whatever excess. So it's just a way of getting a reference point. The other thing I did was down here in this pocket, this chunk of metal was in the way. So if I was trying to put the wheelhouse in there, it would fight me. Now, of course, we know the rocker's coming off, but I want to use the pieces that I have available. So this is the factory space. I want to keep that. Back here, there was a little piece of metal hanging off where they had trimmed it, and then of course these spot welds were drilled, and I just ground that off so that I would, have a flat surface. So now I'm going to work on trimming down that piece and see if I can't get it into this opening. So it's getting closer. The really hard part with doing it like this is you cannot just push this up against the bottom because it's the same size. If you try to put two bowls the same size, put them together, it's not going to work. So what I'm doing is I'm cutting down a little bit at a time. This is pretty close now. This is probably going to be where it ends up. And I need to remove some more material in this area so that, in effect, this can come this direction. And while it's doing that, it's going to correct this. It'll bring it forward, and then that'll also allow this to come up. So it's just a matter of, I call it whittling. It's like you take a piece of wood, you whittle it to fit. I'm doing the same thing with metal. Now, the nice part about metal is if you mess up, you can add some more metal to it. But with wood, you mess up, you're starting over. So this is going to work out. And I've been checking my measurement, and it's very consistent. And it should be, because this flange is actually helpful. It's keeping this distance the same, and this pocket is keeping this piece in location. So otherwise, I'm just going to keep whittling down until I get it the shape that I want, and then we'll take another look at it. I thought I would show you this part first. I do have the wheelhouse clamped in place, basically, and I wanted to fit the quarter panel onto the car. And it looks like things are going to work out. It fits into the pocket pretty well, where the wheelhouse meets the quarter. Up front here, I've got good contact, and then it gets a little bit fatter as I go up. And there's really nothing I can do about that at this point. It's making contact back here. It fits nice on the front and rear. But the one thing I can do is modify the drop on this quarter. So this is tapered slightly. And I can dolly that up just a little bit, and it's going to help take care of this gap. It's not a very big gap between the quarter and the wheelhouse, but it is something that I will have to address to make sure it fits snugly all the way across when I weld it together. Let me take the quarter back off and show you the wheelhouse. So here's the wheelhouse. I do have it clamped up on the existing flange. and that worked out really well. Pretty close to being lined up on that hole. I don't know how critical that really is. And I'll show you this. This worked out pretty well, making this line, and here, and even here it's pretty decent. But sometimes I take off too much metal. But the beauty of it is, it's metal. I can make a little filler strip, weld that in, and it's good to go. Here, this is kind of, and this is really hard to explain, but you know, the wheelhouses, or these aftermarket parts, they can be slightly bigger than what was in here, and that's really what I'm running into at this point. And I think that's why this is a little bit high. If it was built just that much smaller, this would be slightly lower. As it is, it's overlapping this flange that I left behind. You can see the gap there. And I'll still make it work, but it's going to be pushing it in and welding it on. It's just one of those things. So when you push here, push down on this section, it raises that section. Same thing, push here and it raises it there. The nice part is it's underneath the quarter. So I can make all that solid, make it fit the quarter fine, and put some, you know, when it has undercoating on it, it won't make any difference at all. It is what it is. So I'm going to continue on and see what I can get done. I wanted to give you some perspective as to how much of a gap there really is. As I mentioned, the front section here fits pretty nice. Back here, again, pretty nice. Flows pretty even. But then as I come up further, that gap gets big. Now, there's a couple things that come into play here. Obviously, these are aftermarket parts, as I've said before. And there are some, you know, variables that you just can't do anything about. But as I'm looking at this, I'm realizing, you know, I could easily dolly this section up right here and make it match the wheelhouse, or I could bend this flange down slightly and get it closer to the quarter. This angle on the quarter feels more correct as to what it should look like. But there's another thing I think I can do. When I was putting this up there and I was pushing on different places on the wheelhouse, I pointed out that one push here changed the shape over here because it just seemed like it was a little bit long. Honestly, I think what I'm going to do is cut the wheelhouse. I'm going to split that thing, allow the two pieces to come together slightly, and that'll eliminate some of this space right here. I know it's a little extensive, you know, and there's other ways that you could maybe, you know, manipulate it, like I said. But for me, I want to try to make this wheelhouse fit closer to this quarter. So that's the plan. I'll put this back up in place and show you what I'm talking about. So one more time, you know, I push here, it makes this part come out. I push here, makes that part go up. So I'm probably going to cut this somewhere in this area and just try to eliminate a little strip of metal, let it come together, and that'll help take care of those high points. Now that I've cut the wheelhouse in the center and shortened it up a little bit, that helped a lot. I don't know if I can get the camera in there to show you exactly. Let me get a light. I don't know how well that shows up, but that gap is smaller than what I had before. And I could probably even cut a little more out of that wheelhouse and help with eliminating a little more of that gap. But overall, that's an improvement. So I'm happy I did that. Just wanted to give you a quick update. You probably hear my fan running that I have up in the rafters up there. I wanted to do a little repair work on the inner wheelhouse. There was a bad section right here, so I'm going to make a patch, rebuild that before I put the new piece in. So I want to take care of it. Also, I wanted to get some of the dust and dirt out of the rocker panel, and you could probably see just how much. This is just blowing out with an air hose, and this is dirt and dust everywhere. It's going up inside the car, so that's why I have the fan on. But I'm going to repair that little section right there, and also I'm going to back weld the inside of this wheelhouse so that everything is solid. So here's what I've come up with. I've cleaned up the metal and I sprayed it with some weld through. I don't always use weld through, but in this case I wanted to add some. I've made this little patch piece and it'll get welded in. If I can do this with my left hand. It'll get welded in right there, and of course this will get overlapped with the outer wheelhouse patch that I'm putting in, so that'll take care of that intersection. Here's the status now. I have prepped the flange, put some weld through primer on, also prepped that flange, although I may not weld this just yet because I may make a decision as to whether I want to keep this piece or replace it. But I made it ready just in case I'm satisfied with it. Also over here, I prepped that area, and I ground the metal on the flange that I will be welding to hold it together. On the main panel, I did the same thing, did some prep work there, also on that flange, and I did add a little piece of metal, which is what you can do to fill in that gap and recut it. So everything is really right where I need it. On the front section here, I'll have to add some primer on that, but I drilled the holes that will weld to that intersection right there, and that's about it. Everything else should be ready to go. So here's where we're at. You saw that I had put this in place and then test fitted the quarter. I went inside of this opening and tacked it up here. That way I was confident with how it was positioned in the quarter, knowing also that this flange here was clamped in place. And then I just started stitch welding it together around the edge. Now all this will get sanded down and smoothed out. There's still more to do down here, and I am not going to, I don't think I am anyway, going to weld this interior portion just yet. I want to make sure that I don't interfere or have problems with the rocker panel, and I don't think any of that will get in the way, but the rocker panel needs to come off regardless. Back here, again, I didn't plan to weld this to this drop off yet, and I will need to weld these spot welds back in. But otherwise, I'm happy with how it's turning out. I think it looks pretty good. Well, I think that's going to be the end of this video. I was really hoping that I would have gotten more done this week. In fact, I was hoping that I would have been tackling the rocker panel. But I had a couple days, I had to take care of some family stuff, and you know, Easter's coming and all that stuff that we have to participate in. And that's okay. Sometimes you have to set this stuff aside and work on it when you can. So don't forget that when you're working on your project. Now, I'm happy with the wheelhouse. I think it looks great. I've test fitted the quarter panel, and I think it's going to be fine. Next video, I am going to be working on the rocker panel. Now, I will probably finish welding all this stuff together and maybe, you know, cover some of that whenever I work on the rocker panel itself. But that'll be the next video, and I think that'll be part 9, right? I think. So, anyway, thank you for watching. Thank you for participating in any of the stuff that I do, whether it's on a live stream or it's here. You know, leaving a comment, a thumbs up, all that stuff helps out. I also want to thank my patrons for supporting me, and I'm thankful that they are on board and helping me out as well. But yeah, that'll be it. So until next time, Take care of yourselves. See ya.